There is no denying that we have become increasingly dependent on technology, either by accident or by design. But in a way, this rampant penetration of technology in our lives has further deepened the digital divide. What sort of state policies do we need that help to bring about more equitable distribution of opportunities? My guest today highlights this need is for more compassionate and empathetic state that is able to create opportunities that are inclusive in nature. She shares such enlightened views today with us, and I'm really pleased to welcome none other than Dr. Payal Arora on Her Stories. Dr. Payal Arora is a digital anthropologist. She is currently the professor and chair in technology, values and global media cultures at Erasmus University Rotterdam. She is the founder and the executive director of Catalytic Lab, which is a digital activism organization. She is a member of several boards and advisory committees, including Facebook's Social Science One, Columbia University Earth Institute, and World Women Global Council in New York. She is an award-winning author of several books, including The Next Billion Users, and has been named by Forbes as the next billion champion and the right kind of person to reform tech. On Her Stories, she shares her views on how technology can be strategically leveraged in an altered landscape created by the pandemic, the critical role that the state can play in offering better services to the low-income communities. What we need today is an accelerated effort and a continuation of a momentum by institutions and the state of finding ways that create inclusive opportunities. Besides the outstanding contribution Payal has made in the area of her work, she is also a great example of someone who has had the courage to defy deeply entrenched social norms. She has refused to bow down to predetermined benchmarks of success, and after a lot of hardships and petty failures, she has carved out her own unique success story. Welcome Dr. Payal Arora on Her Stories.
Thanks, Richa, for having me here.
Dr. Payal Arora, we have heard a lot about your book, The Next Billion Users, and that has been fed by a decade-long research, if I'm right. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little about the book and what has been your take on that?
Yeah, so, this book actually came from an accumulation of work over a decade, because this is something I've been pursuing since, for more than a decade, as I mentioned. And partly it's to do with the fact that, I grew up in a little bubble in Bangalore, urban, middle class, so even though you read all this about poverty, etc., you don't actually interface and really build empathy with a lot of the India's poor. And so I sort of floated through until when I went to the US, and I got this opportunity, ironically, to get a project through Hewlett-Packard to come back to Kuppam, a small constituency of Chandrababu in those days. And it was about, digitizing a village and making them move out of poverty and socioeconomic mobility, right? And that's when I really got a sense of how different people's lives are, but yet it wasn't as exotic. They were very much like us in terms of, wanting what we want, like fair pricing, entertainment, because it can get very boring, gaming for kids, movies in the evening so people can come together like as a family after working on the farm. So very, very normal, human needs, but there are a lot of challenges. And so I started to see this, and what really annoyed me is because since over a decade of different kinds of projects I've been working on, is that we tend to sideline their stories as if it's either anecdotal or it's something that is only for, or the peripheries, because we look at it as a market paradigm, that who are the real users in terms of who are the consumers, right? And the fact is, the majority of the world are the next billion users. They are half the world's poor, constitute the population of the world, and yet we represent such a small sliver of them. So this is where the book really emerged from.
Okay.
That's interesting that you mentioned that a lot of the times we have a certain perception that this is how it will be used or not used. But the reality is their interests and passions are very similar to anybody else's.
Absolutely.
And that's how it is. Um, yeah, Dr. Arora, if we see the situation is such that technology has come to rule our world, there is a complete dependence on it because of the pandemic, and a lot of people are making use of it. Some are more privileged than the other. As of now, it's difficult to say what is the impact of this, and it is going to be very disproportionate how different demographies or different profiles of people have been able to make advantage of this technological innovations or solutions as they are. But it can be easily assumed that a lot of low income communities may not have access to the technology the way we have it, or the privileged class might have it. How would then you foresee that it is going to deepen the digital divide, and what is going to be the long term impact if it is just to inform policy, or what are the certain measures that could be taken?
Yeah, I mean, it is extraordinarily disturbing, and of course, to see that many of the institutions which are geared towards lessening the divides between the poor and the rich, right? Like, for example, one of the most fundamental for socioeconomic mobility is education. The ideal and the hope and parents have that if only our kids can get access to education, maybe they will have a little better life than them, right? And that is driving a lot of the global poor. They will do extraordinary amounts of hardship. They will move to the slums. They will take on 3 jobs just so they can have their children have a better life, right? But unfortunately, what has happened with COVID, it has completely been disruptive. Parents who have managed to carve out enough money to send their kids to school, etc., especially even girls, right? There's even a gender dimension. It is even more amplified because when the kids are at home, then it is easier to get them to labor. And girls already do much more work in general because of the social norms of devaluing women in societies. It's not just India, in many global South countries. So these are the dark times. But how do we get beyond it? Because it is very clear that you can't digitize these kind of core social institutions because digital platforms are not there yet. And if anything, that there is a real existential question of should states be driven and should they become the sources for these kinds of platforms, because we've had a lot of these conversations that platforms are corporate, so the concerns are who is collecting our data, etc., right? People are worried that why should Facebook be the main public sphere for many of the developing countries, and now the states are saying, oh, maybe we need to come up with our own platforms, whether it's simple as bailout money. So you have e-payments being meted out by states, and they are rethinking what it means to take on banking, right? So we're talking about real restructuring of the logics of relations and functioning in society. But this is going to take a lot of time, investment, and momentum. Most importantly, momentum. Is there enough and sufficient motivation? Because look, the optimistic side is that if a state makes a decision that they want to do it, they can in a very accelerated manner. We have also seen on a positive level states moving extraordinarily quickly in bailout money, for example, right? And we've seen this across the world happening. Look at Bangladesh, just our neighbor here, is within a month they managed to come up with an entire a financial system to directly send bailout money to the workers, right? Which is unprecedented, is to come up in such a short time, and millions of people got on that platform within a few days. Same thing happened in India, is in a very accelerated amount of time, because it is a matter of survival, right? So that really sort of situates how important a good state can be in changing the dynamics, and we don't need to wait for decades for that to happen. So it really actually reveals that What we need is an enlightened, motivated, and compassionate state. But it is much more than that, right? Because even then, when you start to operationalize intent, you need a functioning state. And that's the dilemma. We don't as yet have a functioning state at a more localized, international, inter-regional level. And these things need to be thought through in ways and also policed in one way or the other, right? Where the corruption nodes, where the weak points, where the strong points, which actors can we rely on? But let's shift the conversation on, but what do the everyday people who are right now living with this do, right? When you are a low income person, you have lost your job, you have your children at home, you have sacrificed so much for them to go into a school, and then you're told that they will lose possibly a year of schooling. And that could actually mean that it sets you back, and you may not even be able to afford to send them back to school. So it really reminds us about the notion of the public and public education, how it needs to be free, accessible, and participatory. And that is, something that technologies can help out with, for sure. And, and it's something that I hope through the right amount of compassion that we are able to enable that, right? Because it is, even though it sounds extraordinarily dark, and these are the times where we need a hope narrative, then the hope narrative is that I do believe, based on all my experience with these kinds of communities, that even in extraordinary circumstances, they find opportunities to learn, to grow themselves, to share, to be compassionate to one another. So I do not believe that in this, say supposing your children sitting at home, you're not going to not be learning. I'm sure they will be learning many things. The problem is this kind of informal learning has always happened since there's been humankind, right? The problem is about legitimizing your knowledge. And that is a differentiation, right? Is that I could know a lot, but I don't have a degree to prove it. So, and that's the reality, is I could teach myself through YouTube videos. I could teach myself by having conversations with all kinds of people through TikTok videos. Of course, now that's banned, I believe, but all kinds of ways. But how do I legitimize myself, and how do I prove myself to the other that I am, a person that has substance? And I think that's something that is going to be one of the biggest challenges, is that we still have a very narrow stream of what constitutes a legitimate knowledge.
So you mentioned that it is now a situation where people are there at home, low income, they still may be learning. The children still, but as you said, it is informal, and unless it is recognized or it is given in a formal shape or an institution, it unfortunately doesn't hold valid in most circumstances. And technology can play a role, and what is required is an empathetic state which is compassionate, which is progressive, and has that ability and be able to gain that momentum. So if there is a sort of a concrete step that needs to be taken, where technology and the state intent can come together, like having informal means through YouTube videos or other channels, what are some private companies or institutions come up with these educational videos. But if a state has to take that stand to reach out to most people, whether it is in a rural setting or in an urban low-income setting, what could those certain concrete measures be?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been having a conversation about, but haven't been sort of incentivized to disrupt, is the need for continuing education. Because in the age of automation, in the age of concerns that how a lot of our human labor can be replaced by the machine, there's a lot of conversation about how do we reskill, upskill people, right? But in the meantime, but there has not been that kind of urgency to, address it. But today, in these COVID times, this urgency is here and now more so than ever. And the way we can actually address it is that we need to recognize that education needs to be a continuum. not in segmented parts where you have a particular curriculum and you have become that person, and thereby you are qualified. And I think one of the things for us to, like say for example the case of India, for them to get out of this in a way which can be stronger for the nation and for its people is, for example, the role of companies. How do you hire? What was interesting is Elon Musk made a comment saying he is not going to look at degrees anymore when he's going to hire. Tesla and their whole group is going to just hire based on skills and their abilities to do certain tasks. So the way of hiring, and that's something, by the way, it's not just because of a degree or lack of degree. Engineering, for example, they do it. They give you problems. And it doesn't matter whether you have a degree or not, because there's a scarcity, right? And if you're problem-based and you're able to address it, then that means you're qualified. So, but that needs to change for across different sectors. Let people showcase what they're able to do. If they're able to do it and they have the motivation to do it, then they should have the opportunity to do what they can do, right? And another part is that each and every company, corporation, entity needs to look at them as investing in people. So they take these people and create in their sort of as a good workplace environment, continuing education. Because if you want quality goods, you want to be really competitive in these economies, you need to invest in people, because you will get a tenfold back, which means that you continue the education. So that would really change the paradigm. There's another very important conversation taking place about universal basic income. Now, rather than constantly framing this as welfare economics, where people are looked upon as some sort of like beneficiaries, or, we negate the very essential need of dignity. People want to feel proud, because the fact is that almost everybody has something to contribute. And I love this idea of guaranteed work schemes. Because look at and we have evidence. It's not this is that novel. Look at the Great Depression, okay? During the Great Depression, they literally guaranteed jobs. And what did that do? The artists did murals, landscaping, cleanliness of streets, a lot of infrastructure got built. In fact, the well-being of an entire nation and its people went up because you put priority towards a lot of these entities. And what tends to get marginalized a lot is the economy of care, because we desperately need this, and these are extraordinarily underpaid, and it is extraordinarily human driven, which is what I mean by the economy of care, is that especially during COVID times, there is a need for nurses, there's a need for people the mental health, for example, a lot of where the human to human, where I can understand your needs, and that is a huge area to develop, right? And to value, and that is the most critical, is we need to give its due value, and that is an expanding force if we allow it, because we don't have enough in the care industry. We barely invest in that, and if you can't care mentally, physically for your people, then they will not be able to optimize all kinds of the initiatives, whether it is self-reliance India, that is, the sort of the mantra of the day. How do you remain self-reliant if you don't invest in the self, right? So these are very concrete measures of changing your duties as a business to the people, to understand your employees are some people who are not disposable, but are human investments that can actually grow with your company, that to grow people is to grow your company. So that kind of shift in mindset. So long-term paradigm of thinking, the need for the nation to understand that welfare is not about handouts, but it is about security for the people, so they can put their own investments. So you can guarantee it with work, because it's not a handout, but it is a trade of them giving due value to boost the society overall. And we do need, investments across board. India would do so much better with, cleanliness, infrastructure, all these essentials, care, healthcare, education, all of it, right? And the arts. a lot, because we need motivation, aspiration, we need hope, and hope comes through with, the beauty of what we can produce through a human collective, which is often through the arts.
Wow. I think it is extremely interesting and very valuable to get your insights on what you mentioned, that letting people feel valued and investing in aspects which may not be just about what returns you are getting, but nurturing ideas of hope and healthy mindsets. And as you mentioned, that it may not be just always a degree to prove your worth. People have an opportunity to showcase their skills. What exactly are they capable of doing? And getting their work accordingly. I think these are very progressive, and we need these kind of thought processes much more now than any other time. And Dr. Arora, it's always a pleasure to listen to you and to get your ideas on board. And tell us a little about yourself. You had such a extensive research experience and so much that you have worked on in media and technology. Some experience of yours that you'd like to share that stands out for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to share that because often I think people look at my profile and they literally, I get this one response: "Oh, it's a very intimidating CV," or "My God, you've done so much. How have you done all this?" And so, this is a game of always showcasing success. And of course, with social media, the success gets amplified. But behind all this is a huge buildup of failure. It comes from a result of numerous amounts of failures, of second guessing. For example, I quit college in India because I felt disillusioned. Actually, it starts off with Catholic schooling. I was expelled from school because I witnessed a couple kissing, and it was Catholic schooling in Bangalore, so they expelled me. It was extremely devastating as a teenager. Humiliating. Then I went to college and I quit college thinking that I don't fit in. I feel it is too much of rote learning. I'm not getting what I want to get. Then I got lost. I ran away from home. I went to Kerala. I joined an artist community. I tried to do something. I was extraordinarily idealistic. Then, numerous things. I moved to San Francisco. I was a waitress. I was doing that illegally, working day and night. And I was treated in an Indian restaurant like a lower caste person. I couldn't touch the dishes. I had to sit on the floor and eat. It was a really interesting and heart-rending experience working with Mexican dishwashers and all kinds of people. And so I actually experienced, and again, I didn't know what to do. There were numerous points where I had no idea what was I capable of, what can I do. Am I a failure? I am a failure because I'm not legitimized by people, by the state, by companies and remuneration. These are the values, right? How much am I getting paid? Am I recognized? Do I have a cool title to my name? And often what has changed in my course is people believing in me, people giving me a chance, just people saying, "Oh my God, you can really do it." And that itself was a fuel for me to live up to that expectation. So, I remind myself, and I try to do that in my life, is like, I try to go beyond the whole status thing, go beyond, because that, these kinds of experiences don't go away. I am always reminded of, it's not easy to be in that state and forget it, right? So I remember sitting on the balcony and just completely huddling in San Francisco, like in the rain, and just crying, wondering, what am I doing with my life? It was, and mental health, and trying to do it all, in a marriage where I was trying to cook and clean and hold a job and thinking I need to do it all as a woman. So there's all these points, and I say this knowing that is not making one look good, but it's very, very important, because people think we need to, like, oh, look at this pathway of success, it's just so clean. And we don't see that much of it is because of these extraordinary hardships that make us determined, only because we are pushed by people. And so if we can give back in any way, then we should, because that's all it takes, is a little nudge, a little faith in each other, and it can do wonders, actually.
Uh, it's great to listen to this, and I think you have been very open and candid in sharing all your failures and what were those low moments. But I think a lot of us have also experienced, and many people will connect and relate with your idea that you do feel that, this is it, I have failed in life, there's nothing better that could happen. And because people don't validate what you have done, because there is not enough recognition that you get that you ought to. And I think it's extremely inspiring to say that despite a lot of challenges and the way you have kind of worked your way and evolved in a way that you believed in and something that you are proud of. I think that's so important for anyone to know. And Dr. Payal Arora, I'm very thankful to you that you took out time for this, and it was an absolute pleasure to hear all of your ideas. Thank you for being on Her Stories.
Thank you, Richa, and really enjoyed it. Take care.
Most welcome.